Welcome to the Word for Life podcast, a daily devotional covering the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation.
In Joshua chapter 5, we see how God prepared Israel before He led them into the cities of Canaan. First, God worked in the hearts of the people in Canaan. Verse 1 says, "Now when all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings along the coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan before the Israelites until they crossed over, their hearts melted in fear, and they no longer had the courage to face the Israelites." Amorites refers to those in the hill country, and Canaanites refers to those in the valleys and plains. We see here that fear came upon the leaders as a result of God's work for Israel. Therefore, they did not try to attack Israel at this point. Next, God spiritually prepared all the Israelites by commanding them to undergo circumcision, because verse 5 says, "All the people that came out of Egypt had been circumcised, but all the people born in the wilderness during the journey from Egypt had not." You see, God made a covenant with Abraham and then asked him to circumcise his children as a sign of that covenant. So, this sign reminded Abraham's children that they became God's children not because they were righteous, but because God in His grace called, chose, and made a covenant with Abraham. Friends, for Christian believers, baptism is a sign of God's covenant with His church. It tells us that it was because of the righteousness of Christ we are favored by God and not because of our righteousness. Next, the Israelites celebrate the Passover and the festival of the unleavened bread. You see, these festivals are not simply about eating certain foods or enjoying national holidays. The Passover reminded Israel of their own covenant with the Lord, and the festival of the unleavened bread reminded them of their exit from Egypt. So again, we see how God prepares the hearts of the Israelites spiritually before moving them into Canaan. They are spiritually reminded that they are God's people and God has redeemed them from Egypt. This must give them confidence now that whatever lies ahead of them is in God's hands. They are God's people and God will lead them even now into Canaan. For a Christian believer, the communion is the New Testament Passover. Every time at the communion, the Christian believer is reminded of Christ and His saving grace. The communion tells us that God will lead us to His eternal kingdom. We will one day eat and drink with God in His kingdom. Finally, God appeared to Joshua and prepared him also. In verse 13 we read, "The commander of God's army stood in front of Joshua with a drawn sword in his hand." This means God has come to Canaan to execute His judgment. You see, God appeared to Moses at the burning bush and told him He has come to deliver His people from Pharaoh. Now, God has come to Canaan. When Joshua had this experience of God, he immediately submitted to God. Verse 14 says, "Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and took off his sandals and submitted to God's plan for Canaan." Friends, God prepares our hearts also before He begins to fulfill His will in and through us. May we also say, "Let Your will be done, Lord."
Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow for the next episode of the Word for Life podcast.